In March of 1997, in Rancho Santa Fe, California, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult, including the leader, Marshall Applewhite Jr., ingested a mixture of some drugs which included phenobarbital, alcohol, and some added a plastic bag for suffocation to end their lives, to join an alien spaceship to take them to what they called a level above human, or what would be equivalent to their heavenly promised land. The Hale-Bopp comet, which orbits the Earth only once every 2,000 years, was coming in March of 1997, and they were told by Marshall that there was an alien spaceship lodged in the tail of the comet, and this would be their time to exit and catch a ride into eternity. This unfortunate event has bizarre twists and turns and affected families, friends, the community, and the world. This is a traumatic tale of twisted, toxic religious beliefs, science fiction, and New Age beliefs that formed a strong delusion that overtook and connected Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles to form a cult. And this union grew into a community of believers over the years that ended so tragically. Not long before 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult ended their lives, they participated in final exit interviews before their deaths. This audio is from a video of two women, one named Lavoti and the other named Javoti, obviously made-up names, expressing their feelings on video before their demise. In the audio clip, one of them refers to a T and a Doe. These are names that were affectionately used to identify the leaders of the cult, Bonnie Nettles as T and Marshall Applewhite as Doe.
We're very happy and proud to have been members of Tito's class, and couldn't be happier about what we're about to do. Doubt is never an issue. Certainly, at times, temptations of the vehicle or dumb influences might turn our heads for this reason or that, but there's always a deep down knowing that from the moment of seeing T and know that this is why I'm here, to take this vehicle and do this task. And always knew that I knew T and Do from before this time, that there was strong recognition. And Jenny, felt the same way.
Only thing I can think is that, it seems like probably the ones who will be, the blame will be pointed at would be T and Do, and we've always had free reign to come and go and believe or not believe since day one in the class, and in fact more times than not T and Do would put effort into pushing anybody out of the class that didn't want to be here, and wasn't just full steam ahead with what they knew the truth of the next level to be. And the funny thing is that, we all came, just human vehicles with minds entering those vehicles that had to take them over. And the crazy way that it works is that the more we put into practice the teachings and the behavior and the guidelines that T and Do taught us, the proof of the truth that they held.
Marshall Applewhite Jr. was born in Spur, Texas on May 17, 1931. His father was a Presbyterian minister, and he seemingly had a normal childhood. As Marshall grew up, he had religious pursuits at one time, and he graduated and married in 1952. In 1956, Marshall attended the University of Colorado and received a master's degree in music. In the early 60s, Marshall traveled to New York to pursue an acting career, but he did not obtain any notable success in that field. So Marshall became a professor at the University of Alabama. However, Marshall was eventually fired for having an affair with a male student. He and his wife separated and eventually divorced in 1968. After being fired from the University of Alabama, Marshall later taught music at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. However, there was speculation that he was sleeping with a male student there as well. He left that position complaining of emotional problems, severe depression, and possibly psychosis caused by schizophrenia. His condition was serious enough for him to be admitted to a mental health facility for a period of time. In 1972, Marshall became friends with a lady named Bonnie Nettles and developed a purely spiritual connection with her. Bonnie Nettles had an obsession with aliens and believed that an alien spaceship would eventually come to collect her. Her daughter, Terry Nettles, recalled as a young girl how her and her mother would gaze into the skies looking for UFOs, wishing to be taken up. There was a strong longing within both of them at that time to go to another world because they felt they were otherworldly. Her mother also did astrology charts and believed that there was something special about her friend Marshall's chart. And over time, Bonnie's belief in aliens and Marshall's religious beliefs kind of meshed into a collective belief in aliens and the two witnesses from the book of the Revelation in the Bible. They embraced their season of ministry as the end times, like in the book of the Revelation, and called themselves the Two. They believed their union and calling was divinely orchestrated by God, and they had a mission to lead a group of believers to a higher level of thought and existence. They believed they had originally come from outer space and were then housed inside of their bodies, which they took over. Marshall and Bonnie structured their cult with some rules and regulations that were, in their mind, meant to lead their followers to salvation. They were encouraged to reach salvation through purity by detaching from worldly things, such as sexual activity, their own individuality, drugs, and money. They dressed in similar clothing, had short haircuts, and wore Nike tennis shoes for some reason. In 1973, Marshall and Bonnie, who left her children with her ex-husband, whom she had been married to previously for 23 years, went on a spiritual road trip for a year. And along the way, Marshall was arrested for stealing a rental car and served 6 months in jail. In jail and during this spiritual road trip, their doctrine and ideology took shape, and they were okay with the car theft because they felt they were above earthly law. At first, their group was called Human Individual Metamorphosis, which later became Heaven's Gate. By 1975, they were known as the Two, as in the two witnesses from the book of the Revelation, as stated before, and they believed they could communicate telepathically. They were able to draw people from the waning hippie movement and religious seekers who were into transcendental meditation, astrology, tarot cards, etc. The cult survived financially by selling their blood at blood banks, members offering trust funds, members seeking donations, and later they did very well with an online business doing personal websites. It was isolated communal living for the cult members, and sometimes they lived on campgrounds outside or in indoor housing together. The cult members were mostly estranged from their families. However, a concerned parent named Nancy Brown created a newsletter for the estranged family members of the cult. Once the newsletter was discovered by Marshall, he was not pleased with it and fearful of what the families may do, so he allowed some members to visit their families. Nancy Brown did get a visit from her son, but he was not the same son she had raised. It was wonderful to see him, but the change was jarring. He was fully indoctrinated. Along the way, the cult did experience members leaving, and in 1984, Bonnie Nettles was diagnosed with brain cancer. She was admitted to a hospital under an assumed name and died there. Her death created a somewhat crisis of faith for Marshall, and I can imagine the cult as well. Along the way, the cult did experience members leaving, and in 1984, Bonnie Nettles was diagnosed with brain cancer. She was admitted into a hospital under an assumed name and died there. Her death created a somewhat crisis of faith for Marshall, and I can imagine the cult as well, because they were supposed to be the two who were going to be picked up by a UFO. So instead of rethinking his calling and doctrine, he thought it through and came up with an explanation for Bonnie's death, which went something like she was too high for this world and had to go. And now the cult was going to have to die first before boarding the spaceship, which he still fully believed in despite Bonnie's death. So her death didn't wake him up, it just shifted to death as the means of transport. He never informed Bonnie's children or family of her death. They found out much later that she had died, and they actually lived close enough to where they could have visited her to at least say goodbye. After Bonnie's death, Marshall became even stricter with his rules and regulations, and outside interactions with the world became even more scarce and shunned. He was distant from the members, and eventually he proposed to the male members that he was going to be castrated and petitioned others to join him. It appears this was his way of course, killing his sexual appetite, but also his desire for men. Not all participated in this procedure, but 6 male members, along with Marshall, went through with the procedure. In the 1990s is when the cult made substantial income doing personal websites on the internet while also spreading their message. They were in the realm of making almost $500,000 a year and were able to take out a full-page ad in USA Today and other mainstream popular media outlets. By this time, the members' lives and minds were entrenched in the ideology of the cult, and everything around them appeared to them to be messages and fulfilled prophecies. Even normal weather patterns became divine messages. So in March of 1997, the cult went out to eat on the night before their deaths. The restaurant recalled they seemed very normal and a happy group of people. Marshall Applewhite and 39 of his cult members took their lives in their home. They had on their typical uniform, Nike shoes, and some were covered with a purple cloth covering their upper bodies. It was a sad scene. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles were not necessarily cult leaders that conned their members. It seems as though they really believed in their calling and in their doctrine. That is not to say that they were not manipulative, just that they were also believers of their message, although, according to Bonnie's daughter, letters she received from her mother in later years made her wonder if her mom was still a believer. This is such a sad story that shifted from a group of people waiting for an event to happen, the alien spaceship coming to get them, to the leader changing the doctrine to an event that required them to end their lives to reach that same goal. This cult's beliefs went deep. No one was forced to end their lives and ingest a lethal dose of drugs and alcohol, and some chose to cover their heads with a plastic bag to ensure success. Marshall Applewhite even had alien abduction insurance on some of his members. I hope the families of the deceased cult members have somehow found some peace after all of these years, but I'm sure the pain will never go away. I will end this story with audio from Nancy Brown, who created that newsletter and was the mother of David Moore, who ended his life with the cult on that day.
When my phone rang, up till that point, I had left open every hope that David was involved because the media still didn't have the factual information that would confirm it. But as soon as I heard that first sentence, I knew all was lost.
Stay safe, stay alert, and I pray for each person affected by these bizarre crimes from the past and the present. God bless.